We'd gone through all of the mood stabilizers, most of the antipsychotics. He was getting all the lithium side effects, and he was doing terrible. And what had developed over time was more and more autistic features. He had to build a maze every day with Scotch tape throughout his house. And he was barricading himself in his room, you know, with stuffed animals to protect himself. And he couldn't understand humor anymore. And he was doing miserably academically and had no friends and was impossible to deal with. All the kinds of sort of asocial, loss of social reciprocity, loss of language, obsessiveness that we see in autism. But he didn't start out that way. It's not like it started when he was 2, it started when he was like 10. So something was amiss. Now his sister comes to see me, terribly depressed. Well, of course you're depressed. You've got, you know, you're the sibling of a child with a mental illness. It's hard. And when I started listening to what she said about why she was depressed, it wasn't, I have a depressed mood and loss of interest in doing things. It was, Doc, I'm tired all the time. I don't have any energy. You know, I want to do stuff with my friends, but I can't because I don't have the energy. You know, it's not like I don't want to do it. I can't. She ended up actually not being able to go to school anymore because she couldn't get up, or she'd go to school for 3 hours, come home and sleep for 8 hours. So I did worked her up for viruses, and you guessed it, herpes 6, very, very high. And so I started to treat her, and she got better, and all of a sudden she's, you know, back in school full-time, finishes school, goes to college part-time, and has a part-time job and gets married. So she was a lot better. So I said to the folks, all right, there's no way we can get a needle in this kiddo. He hates needles. It's like this huge screaming fight when I finally give in and say, okay, we gotta get a lithium level, we gotta do it. So I said, you know, we don't know how these viruses are transmitted quite. Let's just treat them. What do we got to lose? Valtrex is safe, let's just treat him. He'd already been in and out of the hospital now 7 times, had been diagnosed with autism and bipolar disorder by a total of 10 psychiatrists. He had had the ADOS 3 times, I think. The ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Scale. He started on Valtrex. They come back in a month later, well, Doc, we really haven't seen any change, but you know what? He was kind of getting sleepy, so we cut his medicine back. So in fact, he was taking half as much medicine. You know, he was on like 4 drugs plus the Valtrex. He was taking half as much of his psychiatric meds as he was a month ago, and he was exactly the same. So I said, well, this is promising. Let's see what happens. So they go away, and they come back a month and a half later. They're now at 2.5 months. And they walk in, and you know, Mom walks up and gives me this big old hug. Why? She says, it's like he woke up. He comes up to Mom one day and says, I just noticed that the burners on the stove are different sizes. I'd never noticed that before. He's like 12. And he says, you know, I really need to learn how to cook sometime because like someday I'm going to be on my own. I have to learn how to cook. And he starts doing better academically. And we start taking meds off. And we start taking more meds off. And he's doing better socially. And he's making friends. And he has a sense of humor. And he's now in college learning to be what he always wanted to be, a security guard at Disneyland. He's well on his way. And he's hilarious. He's got this wonderful sense of humor. And all of that was squished by this infection that nobody in psychiatry looks for. So, just to give you a sense. Now, think about depression for a second in a different way. One of the things we know about depression is it damages your brain. Probably no one's ever quite said that before. But it reduces synapses, the connections between brains, cells. It reduces dendrites, or it just like prunes these dendrites. Dendrites are the little trees on neurons that allow them to connect up to other neurons. They look like a rose bush in the winter instead of like a big willow tree. And neurons die as a result of depression. Circuits break down. The hippocampus, which is not where hippos go to school, is the center of learning and memory in the human brain. In people who are depressed, the hippocampus gets smaller, sometimes as much as 50% smaller. Now, the symptoms of depression show up in other brain disorders. I've given you an example, infections. Also, traumatic brain injury. Over 40% of people who receive a concussion develop depression over the subsequent year. And that study, is based on a study that's actually several years old, and the same group just published a trajectory of that, showing the timeline of the onset of depression in post-concussive patients. So, if we think of depression as brain injury, then how is it that antidepressants actually help? Well, catching up here. You want something that actually repairs degeneration, that makes those dendrites rearborize and develop new branches, that makes new synapses form, that makes neurons differentiate, stem cells differentiate into neurons and crawl up and form new circuits. That's what you want if you're going to fix depression. Not cover up depression, not squelch depression, not sort of put a Band-Aid on depression, but fix depression.